we'll make a start. So firstly, thank you for everyone for joining. We've got some really good content lined up. Everyone should be able to put any questions in the chat. So if any questions are in the chat, we've got Rob, and we'll do some introductions shortly. Rob and Pete on the call to answer them immediately. But there will be a section at the end of the session just to cover any questions that are put in the chat. So just by way of introduction, I'm Craig Daniels, and I head up ANS's government and MPO team at ANS. So I've been with the business for nearly 12 years, and have ultimate responsibility for all of our government and not-for-profit customer relationships. I'm sure Pete and Rob will come on to do introductions shortly, but from Pete's perspective, Pete heads up ANS's cloud practice and ultimately responsible for ANS's go-to-market in our Azure cloud space. And Rob is ultimately responsible for ANS's technology direction and our go-to-market. And finally, we are joined by Mike Weston, who's the Director of ICT and Innovation at Sheffield City Council, who will be giving a bit of insight into Sheffield's journey into cloud, and equally what's looking forward for the council moving forward. So the session today is all around how to make sure a successful cloud transformation. So there's a couple of elements that we'll run through. I'll give a quick snapshot of ANS for the people that aren't aware of us as an organisation, and the areas which ANS focus on. Then Rob will just give a bit of a view on some of the bigger picture in terms of what's driving some of the cloud transformation and how that plays into some of the more strategic initiatives around things like data, things like AI, and ultimately how cloud then acts as an enabler to deliver upon them services. We'll go into the key areas of success for a successful cloud transformation, and that'll cover things like technical considerations and making sure technically everything's in place there. Operationally, which will typically be some of the biggest impacting areas, what it means for people, what it means for tooling, what it means for BAU for your organisation. And then the final area is all around commercial. And we've recently been involved in several different types of business cases, some good, some bad. So we can share what they look like, and some best practices that we're seeing work really well at other organisations. And then Mike's going to give a snapshot into Sheffield's journey, like I mentioned, and again what that journey has looked like for them over the past few years, and equally what that looks like for coming few months and years as well. And then I'll wrap up with just where we've seen organisations start on their cloud journey. So hopefully that meets everyone's expectations for the session. So I'll quickly move on into just giving everyone a quick snapshot into ANS for the people that don't know us already. So ANS are ultimately a UK-based services organisation focused around Microsoft technology. We're around 750 people, and we're all UK-based. But for the people that are on this call and that'll be relevant, so we operate in Microsoft's top 0.5% of global partners, being one of 3 globally to have expert MSP status, in conjunction with things like security specialisation and data specialisation. And when you compound that with ANS's industry and vertical knowledge, so overall we have around 400 enterprise customers, and over 50% of that is public sector. And when you combine the technical and vertical knowledge, we're in a really good position to be able to share what's happening across the industry, and that's one of the reasons why we run these type of events. That's a quick snapshot of ANS, but in terms of where we focus as an organisation, like I mentioned, our focus revolves primarily around the Microsoft technology stack in 3 areas. So the first one is around public cloud adoption. How do we help organisations adopt public cloud in the most efficient and optimized way, not only from a technology perspective, but equally from an operational perspective, making sure you've got the right tools, processes, skills in place to be able to manage that cloud environment. And not only once you're onto cloud, how do you take that one step further in terms of modernizing into some other services as well. The second area of our portfolio is all around our security element. We're seeing a lot more organizations adopt different type of cloud services, whether that's on-premise cloud, you're on private cloud, you've got public cloud, you've got SaaS hosted applications. So for our local government customers on the call, things like Northgate, Civica, Capita in their own hosted platforms. When you compound that with additional complexity and services that customers are now looking to adopt, things like data, things like IoT, things like AI, the technology landscape has now become a lot more complex, which ultimately increases the risk for security attacks. So we help organizations with their security posture, making sure that that environment is secure as possible, with things like Sentinel, things like MDR, things like CISO as a service. And then the final area is all around digital innovation. How do we ultimately deliver better services to organizations through the use of things like dynamic data and low code, and ultimately change the way that business operates? So if I look at an example in local government, specifically around technology-enabled care with adult social care and children's social care, how do we extract data from all the multiple different devices and give that data in the hands of community workers, the actual patients themselves, or equally the patient's family, so that they can respond in demand with the actual requirements. So we're doing some really interesting and exciting projects around that. And not only that, we are seeing a lot more use cases around how to streamline citizen engagement with the councils through different multi-channels as well. So these are the areas that we focus on. So if you combine that with ANS's technical accreditations with Microsoft, vertical knowledge around the public sector, and more specifically the verticals in them public sector, and narrow that down into the areas that we focus on. Like I say, we get exposure to multiple different successful projects that ultimately we can then share across our network of customers and potential customers. So that's given a quick snapshot of ANS. I will now hand over to Rob, just to give a high-level view as to what's changing the market and ultimately where cloud plays in the upcoming digital transformation space.
Perfect, thanks, Craig. So hi everyone, I'm Rob Cottrell, Technology Director here at ANS. So my role at ANS is quite wide, it's quite varied, but fundamentally I work a lot with customers on evangelizing and helping them understand the technology landscape, where they're going, where they're heading towards, but really what they want out of technology, you know, and digital transformation is one of these phrases that I think has been bandied around so much of the last couple of years. It's sort of lost a little bit of meaning of what does it actually mean. You know, fundamentally, digital transformation is enabled by technology. You know, it's not defined by it. You shouldn't be embarking on a journey led by the technology. You should be led by the goal, the outcome. What's the bigger picture that you're trying to, you're trying to aim for? You know, it could be the goal. You know, I've heard it called North Star vision. You know, it's a guiding, force, a guiding star that essentially helps you take steps forward, and every step you take forward is one step closer to delivering on that value, delivering on that vision. You know, this is a quote that I quite like and often use. You know, digital transformation is the integration of digital technologies and strategies across an organization to fundamentally change how it operates and deliver value. No, there's two key bits of this quote that I really like. You know, it's the across bit across an organization and the delivering value. They're the two key bits of that phrase that you really should understand and guide you when you embark on using new technology or defining what that North Star vision is. You know, it fundamentally should, it does change things across an organization, but it also needs to deliver value. If you're doing it for the sake of doing it, it's nothing more than a vanity project, and that doesn't deliver value and is almost, likely to fail while you go on that journey. So it's something that you really do need to understand of what value are you trying to deliver when you embark on a journey to adopt technology. You know, digital transformation isn't just one thing, it's a combination of multiple different areas. You know, it's either technology, it's communication within an organization, it's the data that underpins everything, might be automation, IoT. You know, AI is such a popular buzzword at the minute. Everyone wants to use it. You know, it's fundamentally going to change every industry that we know, not just one and not just a small part of it, but actually, getting the value out of it isn't all that easy to do. You know, we all know it's going to revolutionize every industry and what we do, but actually getting to the value and how do you integrate it into an organization is the challenging bit at the minute. And then obviously networking, keeping everything together, keep everything communication. So if you just click on for us, please, Craig, these are the 6 sort of types of digital transformation. So when you talk about, progressing forward, digitally transforming, the bigger picture stuff, it will typically be because of one of these 6 reasons. It might be process, where you're looking to optimize, automate, or innovate operations through digital technology, replacing the legacy paper process with a digital low-code one. It might be business reason, revamping a traditional business, leveraging digital technology to create a new value proposition and revenue streams. Think Uber, where you took a traditional business industry, you phone up to an operator, you book a car, it arrives outside, to overlaying a little bit of technology over the top of that and essentially reinventing that legacy business, still keeping the same fundamentals, but the technology is what's driven the value on top of that existing legacy business model. It could be cultural or ecosystem. You could be moving more to where you're restructuring and aligning the business to be more enablement and more driving the culture within an organization. You see this a lot when you've got organizations adopting data or low code, where you want to empower that end user to use technology more freely and be more creative with what they're trying to do within their role. Culture and ecosystem is very important, certainly when you go into large scale digital transformations that really do step beyond the technology, and it is more around how do I get more value, how do I do more with less, within my organization. It might be customer experience. You might be service provider for an end user. How do you use technology to drive a better experience, whether it's data driven, personalization, or just how do they interface with you? It could be domain, it could be business expanding into digital innovation, to adapt to new market share. You could be expanding that business, expanding that domain expertise that you've got. Or it could just be technology, created interconnected applications, removing some technical legacy debt, giving your platforms the ability to scale, to grow, to be more efficient, but fundamentally, fostering that collaboration and shared value within an organization, that this technology is there to underpin the bigger picture, underpin that North Star vision, and provide value to everyone within the business, not just because it's something that's needed as a fundamental part of what we do. It needs to be a shared value vision across an organization to get buy-in to move that forward. And if you just move on quickly, Craig, this is if you look at technology transformation, which is fundamentally what, us at A&S are in the business of delivering to yourselves and our customers, this is typically your adoption roadmap for an IT transformation. It might start with legacy data centers, servers, racks, etc. But typically the next step is always cloud adoption. It's that cloud enablement, cloud adoption, really giving you that technology agility to move quicker, move your buying model from a 5-year fixed procurement model to a very agile pay-as-you-consume model. But that agility then unlocks everything else on that digital transformation roadmap for yourselves. Typically the next step after cloud enablement and adoption is data consolidation. You've got vast amounts of data. Every application produces that data. Consolidate it and using some of the cloud native technologies far superior than you ever had or ever would get in your on-premise legacy infrastructure. It's endlessly scalable. You've got all of the processing power you can possibly need, and the innovation in that space, is almost changing daily. That is typically the next step where most organizations want to move to. They want to be data driven. They want to be predictive with the data. They want the data to help drive the organization into value, into profit, into really giving that value back to either their end user or end consumer of that business. And then typically, it's business processes. Well, now I've got my data centralized, I've got it accessed. How can I start to build processes and overlay technology over existing processes? It might be paper based, it might be something completely new, to give value, within that and within the business. Add some automation over the top of it, be really efficient with the processes. and then you sort of move into that customer experience arc where you're now into true digital enablement, almost an era of enablement with technology is where we are now. When you look at some of the low-code services, data services, everything is becoming self-service, everything's becoming self-enablement. You're no longer bound by a steep learning curve of technology. That technology expertise is almost evaporating a little bit, certainly as you move more up the digital transformation stack, where end users can now do much more with less. I'm sure everyone's heard of Copilot, ChatGPT, and some of those tools that are coming over the coming years are going to completely remove that barrier to entry to adopt some of these technologies. But fundamentally, everything should be aiming towards this goal, this North Star of this digital transformation. Plan out where you want the organization to go, what does it need to be, how do you get there, and then the technologies fall in line behind that to make sure you're delivering that value across the organization. You can typically come onto this arc, wherever you are from a maturity point of view, but typically it always starts with the cloud enablement. You can't really deliver the value out of any of these other services and technologies without doing the basics, without doing that cloud enablement piece. If you just move on for us, please, Craig. The goal really should start with the basics. You need to sort of understand where you want to head to know how you're going to start and how you're going to proceed thereafter. Cloud is the catalyst, is the enablement for that digital transformation. And when you're in the cloud, when you're adopting those digital technologies, security is just standard. It's there out the box. Microsoft, invests circa 10 billion a year. Within that, they've got dedicated teams, that are just there to try and break that security barriers down to better themselves internally. No other vendor really invests as much within this space. So when you get to that basics, when you get to that cloud enablement and adoption, you can be pretty confident that you're secure as standard, secure first, and everything wraps together. And it's the ecosystem of the basics that you're investing in, less so the technology itself. Thank you. I will hand over to Pete now.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rob. And Pete's going to share his screen directly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rob. Share my screen. So what I'm going to do is just spend a few minutes talking through how we ensure a successful cloud transformation, what that journey looks like, and some of the challenges we may see along the way. So in terms of where you are today, I'm sure a lot of you still got on-premise estates, utilising private cloud technologies, hyperconverged technologies, etc. And you might have constraints which are holding you back from moving towards the public cloud, whether that be because your hardware is still within its current life cycle, whether you're in hosting agreements, managed hosting solutions, colo agreements, etc. But even if we do have some constraints around those physical data centers, there's still access to cloud technologies to help start taking this journey in terms of the likes of Azure Sentinel, the SIEM and SOAR capabilities in terms of that security element, Arc to extend the control of your on-premise workloads and manage those via the Azure portal, managing those Azure policies and that governance model, and giving that consistency if some of those workloads do need to stay on premise, and potentially look at some of the business continuity capabilities the Azure platform offers as well in terms of the likes of Azure Site Recovery and Azure Backup as well. Once you're able to make that wider move towards the cloud technologies, to me, it's all around getting the basics right to enable that digital transformation. So we're looking at getting that enterprise grade landing zone ready, planning out what those migrations could look like, how we can utilize more cloud native DevOps capabilities in terms of Azure DevOps, leading to app modernization, and how we can build those cloud native applications. Once we've got our workloads and data on cloud, it opens up all of the possibilities which Rob touched on in terms of the true digital transformation to an organization. So whether that be data and AI, machine learning, etc., in terms of that data warehousing, analytics, ChatGPT integration, and all that good stuff. Whether that's business apps in terms of Dynamics, whether that's Power Platform in terms of the low-code, no-code platform. And again, I never particularly like us highlighting security as a separate element. It's really across everything we do by default at ANS. But nonetheless, to highlight that, obviously, we wrap all of that in security, and we've got a full 24/7 UK-based SOC to manage that on your behalf if that's desirable. In terms of some of those challenges we could see along the way, they span kind of three different areas. So one's the technical impact. So that's getting the basics right, building out that enterprise-grade production-ready landing zone and having that governance model in place and those foundations in place to drive that digital transformation. Throughout that migration, we often find some quick wins in terms of Azure files, potentially to remove any file server components, Azure Virtual Desktop, etc. And it allows us to start to plan move groups and what that migration plan looks like. Are we working forward from an ASAP perspective? Are we working backwards from a compelling event such as a data center exit or a hardware refresh? And what's the right order to migrate those applications and unpick those tightly integrated applications to drive that migration? What's the operational impact of managing a cloud environment versus an on-premise environment? And that's both across tool sets. I'm sure you've all got decades worth of tools, widgets, scripts, etc. that you've used to manage those traditional on-premise environments. It's always a good opportunity to review those tool sets and move towards more cloud-native tools. And I'll come on to that in a few slides' time. And it's likely we might need some different skills within the organisation to support that cloud environment going forward. And in terms of the business case, how can we support you in that in terms of how we recognise the tangible versus the intangible benefits? What's the business impact? What outcomes are you looking for? And Craig's going to take you through an example business case a little bit later in today's session. Diving into that technical impact in a bit more detail, I think it would be naive to think that any migration is ever going to be linear or simple. So here we see kind of an example journey that we can help organisations such as yourself on towards that true digital transformation in terms of determining what that business strategy is, what the output of it and what good looks like. Typically then starts with some kind of discovery exercise, understanding your existing workloads, the speeds, the feeds, and kind of the application DNA in terms of what those applications are, what they do, how good are they at what they do, what's the impact to your organisation if they're offline for a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, etc. And all of that kind of factual based on your existing estate. Moving through into supporting the business case and planning that migration. How can we then get the technical skilling in place to manage that environment once it's in place? Building out that production-ready enterprise-grade landing zone, executing against those migrations, wrapping it in security, and then how we move that through into kind of BAU operational support as well. In terms of getting the basics right, it all starts for me with an enterprise-grade production-ready landing zone aligned to the cloud adoption framework from Microsoft. So I'm sure there's not many of you on today's call without some presence in terms of Azure Active Directory, which is at the heart of every Azure tenancy. What we can then do around that is map out your enterprise enrollment, look at what your management groups, what that role-based access control needs to look like to suit your environment and suit your applications. We can then build off that the identity and access management and get the right governance, the right policies in place, which ultimately feed down into your subscriptions in terms of management and your workload subscriptions. What we can then do is wrap around it. Oh, sorry, I skipped a slide. We can then map around it, the DevOps capability as well, and all of the features and widgets you need to cater for your workloads. Once we've got that enterprise-grade production-ready landing zone in place, we can start to look at the move groups and planning out those move groups and establishing which order and how fast we can execute against those migrations and working out what your compelling challenges are. Here we've got an example of Server 2012 migrations. I'm sure we're all aware the deadline for end of support's coming up rather soon. But if you migrate those workloads to Azure or you manage them via the Azure portal using Microsoft Arc, you can access the extended security updates from Microsoft free of charge, which is obviously very favourable. Moving on to the operational impact. So what we can do to support you is look at that current state in terms of the people, the skills, mapping out your current roles, responsibilities, and understanding the current way you're running your IT services in terms of the current security policies and frameworks and how they differ for cloud and on-premise, and what that time allocation looks like for managing those platforms and how introducing more cloud-native technologies and automation can drive down that time allocation and free time up and hand it back to the organisation with digital initiatives. We can look forward into that future state and what that target operating model needs to look like to manage that cloud and digital environment. Do we need to get some people on training courses? Do we need to look at some certifications? Do we need to look at hiring a few new heads, for example? And then wrapping that in the case for change in terms of what those ops recommendations are, establishing a cloud centre of excellence internally, upskilling and any learning recommendations, and obviously access to the Microsoft Enterprise Skills Initiative as well to support you on that journey. In terms of that, really important to define your current people, your skills, responsibilities. We can help map out that high-level transition plan aligned to your technical strategy to bring those people on a journey with you with the technology. Recommend any upskilling opportunities as a precursor to Microsoft ESI, and ultimately start to map out not only the technical cost, but the operational cost of moving to a cloud-based environment as well. And the last slide for me today is on the tooling, which I said I'd mention in a bit more detail. So obviously we've all got many tools, widgets, utilities from various kind of more traditional vendors to manage those on-premise environments. It gives a really good opportunity to review that tool set and to potentially modernize some elements of that tool set and then potentially introduce some new tools to help run that cloud platform in a more digital manner. So provisioning and orchestration, looking at automation. Obviously, when you're on premise, you've got a known cost model, and the only variable might be the electric bill, for example, to a certain degree. But with public cloud, we all know it's usage-based, so really good to introduce a cost management and resource optimization tool. Make sure we're running that as commercially savvy as we can. Looking at cloud migration in terms of backup and DR tooling. I'm not going to touch on all of these today, but all the way through into inventory and classification, how we record our cloud-based assets, and how we handle service requests for change of the cloud-based environment in a more modern manner. And on that note, I'm going to hand back to Craig.
Fantastic, thanks Pete. I'll quickly reshare my screen for everyone. And that should be coming through any moment to everyone. Fantastic. So the last third pillar is all around the commercial element, and just going back to Pete's eye chart around no cloud migration is ever linear. The first section of that is all around the business case and the commercial elements, and ultimately making sure that we're getting the rest of the business buy-in, but equally the rest of the operational team buy-in, because ultimately the operational team can impact the success of any cloud migration or cloud adoption. And I mentioned earlier on in the session, A&S gets access to a multitude of different business cases and a multitude of different projects that business cases go through that are successful and not successful. And I guess we're here ultimately to share and what we've seen and ultimately what people sometimes can overlook. And from a commercial perspective, sometimes from a business case perspective, some of the intangible benefits are sometimes overlooked, whether that's when you're adopting cloud. There's a raft of intangible benefits that some customers don't often try and monetize. So for example, on here on the right hand side, by adopting public cloud, it may reduce management time. So if an FTE is spending 100 hours a month on a total loaded cost of 40,000, and that's going to reduce all of that time, it's going to be circa 28k worth of savings. Like I say, some customers do like to add that into the business case, but even if that's being called out as an intangible benefit, it still increases the ultimately the story behind the business case, as well as all the other elements, whether it's increasing security posture. I mentioned reducing operational overheads. We've just worked on a recent business case where a big driver was they were working on traditional technology, and it was difficult to attract or equally retain some of the talent, because they wanted to be working on the latest and greatest cloud technology. So that was a big area for them as an organisation, as to one of the reasons while they were adopting public cloud. And then the other elements is all around the obviously the tangible benefits. What are the elements that if we turn off, we're going to either avoid the cost or reduce our operational capital expenditure? And this is an example around licensing costs. So paying circa £60,000 and reducing all of that as a benefit to the organisation. But what we often see, a business case gets approved, and whether it's cabinet, whether it's by the board, whether it's by trustees, whoever that organisation has got to go through for approval, and then that's then put in the drawer, not to be seen or not to be looked at again from a business case perspective. But there's a few reasons why you would keep a look at them business cases. The first one, specifically with public cloud, it's on pay to consume. I always tend to say public cloud, a successful public cloud transformation isn't necessarily about you've done the migration. It's have you managed to keep cost under control for the 12, 24, 36 months after you've done that. So you want to make sure that whatever you are spending in cloud matches to what you've put in the business case. And secondly, the other areas, we're working with a housing organisation at the minute where over a 5-year period, they're forecasted to save 1.7 million. But in actual fact, they saved 1.9 million. But without keeping a track on what they're spending, what they put in the business case, they would have never known that they've actually saved £200,000 more than what they're expecting to. So they can invest that additional funds into other services like security and increasing that security posture. And thirdly, demonstrating a strong business case on a project, we've seen help future ask for additional projects or additional funds for other projects. So a combination of all them three things is a good reason as to keep an eye on future business cases with cloud transformation. And when we are looking at some of them intangible costs, some customers just look at things like storage, compute, networking, the virtualization layer, but there are so many additional costs outside of that, whether it's power and cooling or the data center maintenance. And if I look at this example here, this was a relatively small environment, and this was going back prior to any increases in power and cooling. So if I look at if we reran these numbers now, these would probably be double than what they're showing on this screen. So one data center, an annual cost of things like power and cooling is circa £30,000, whereas the main data center was costing them circa 113k annually. So if you combine them over 5 years, that can be a significant contribution to their business case, which ultimately will help that organisation, and subsequently they did get this business case approved. And just touching on power and cooling, a lot of organisations on this call, I know there's a lot of central government, local government organisations and not-for-profit organisations on the call that have CO2 objectives and carbon emission objectives. So we're reducing the power and cooling. Obviously, Microsoft data centres are really efficient, and by shutting data centres, what that would mean from a carbon footprint perspective to your organisation. And we've seen some really innovative ways of presenting this, whether it's by number of trees, number of people, number of cars off the road. So again, these are all things that we can share with everyone on this call that we've seen work well over organisation. And there is calculators and there is tools available to be able to, so it's just not mundane, and it's just not time consuming. So these are all readily available, as well as business case tools as well. This is a tool that we use, and it's not just a tool that you can use on a data center exit. It's a tool that can be used across any project that you're looking for a business case. It's a tool called Shark Finesse. There's templates that can be shared that have worked across other organisations. This tool allows you to be really interactive. You can share it internally. You can update it internally. It can present the return in a number of different ways, whether it's internal rate of return, net present value, ROI, however you need to present it. And it's so easy to change rather than being time consuming, whether it's on a spreadsheet, a Word template. And this can all be extracted in a way that's easy for you to present back to your organisation, whether it's in a Word format, in a PowerPoint format, however you need to present that. So it's a really good tool, and again, this is something that we can share with everyone on the call. This is just a few examples that we've seen recently. So this organisation, over a 5-year period, target architecture was actually 9.8, and the cost of replacing was 10.3. So over a 5-year period, saving £570,000, as well as reducing CO2. So 37 tonnes reduced annually. So over a 5-year period that they was looking at the business case for, reducing 185 tonnes over that period. As well as some of the intangible benefits as well, and one that I'd call out here is things like file data. And if you look down here, only 34% of their file data was accessed in the last 12 months. So someone was managing that file data. It was on really expensive storage, replicated between different data centers. So being able to adopt, like Pete said earlier, I don't like to use the word quick wins, but adopting some of them PaaS services at the start of the project unlocks a lot of additional, not only capabilities, but additional time and intangible benefits that the organisation can use on other different pressing priorities. And then outside of that, a lot of business cases, should I say, highlights key risks. And there will be a lot of similar risks across a majority of organisations on this call. Whether it's networking, whether it's skills like Pete mentions, how do we bring the technical community along with us in the journey, or equally legacy applications. There'll be a lot of organisations that have got legacy applications. So how do we manage, how do we engage with the vendors to make sure that they work with us seamlessly, and that moving forward technically they are going to be compatible, integrate, and work as they should. And this is an all-up example working with Manchester City Council. They were working or faced with a significant hardware refresh life cycle. Staff were looking at other organisations because legacy was technology, and some of the other benefits, some of the other elements that they were struggling to cope with was being able to respond to business change or business demand in a quick enough need to the organisation, whether that was because of hardware lead times or configuration of that hardware. So that was some of the contributing factors to them looking at Azure. And so they went through our Cloud Navigator process, free of charge, to ultimately understand where they are today, where they wanted to be, and what that transition would look like within a company and business case. And they adopted some third-party technologies like Rubrik from the backup perspective, but they also adopted some native services like AVD, Azure Files, and they got all the underlying components in place, like production-ready landing zone. So the resulting was 750k worth of savings over 5 years, a reduction of 265 tons of CO2. But a big contributing factor for them was upskilling staff in new technology and new skills in Azure. And that leads me on to Sheffield City Council. So I mentioned we've got Mike on the call, so I'll hand over to Mike just to give a bit of an insight into what Sheffield have done, how they've gone about it, and equally what that means for them as an organisation. So I'll let Mike share his screen and go from there. And I'm sure Mike will probably introduce himself as well.
Thanks, Greg. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Weston. I'm the Director of Digital Innovation and ICT at Sheffield City Council. Been at Sheffield for about 7 years. When I arrived at Sheffield, it was a managed service under Capita. And just to reiterate something that Rob said earlier, what the journey I want to talk about is not about the technology. It's about where we were trying to get to as an organisation. And some of that was from the politics side of things. Our political organisation, they wanted to move from an outsourced arrangement to an insourced arrangement. But from my perspective, I wanted to improve the provision of IT services across the council. So for me, it was about making a step change in our technology environments. We had a long-standing relationship with an outsourced provider. The council had gone through austerity and taken out some of the services, such as technology refresh and DR, out of that contract, which left them in a vulnerable position. We also wanted to get more understanding of what our customers wanted from us, both internally and externally. We want to try and improve the service we're providing for our citizens, but also for our staff. And we wanted to get to a place where we could provide innovation rather than just provide technology and back-end systems for our customers in the council, but also in the citizens. But I think one of the major things that we already also decided is that, having been in an outsourced relationship, we wanted to move into a multi-vendor model. so that we can get best of breed products for delivering IT services across Sheffield Council. So there's also some national drivers that we need, and the move to cloud was a big one of those things. Those changing markets in terms of the technologies. There was a big demand because of austerity to change the way we delivered services, and the services expected IT to respond to that. But we had rising staff expectations. The workforce was changing, and people were coming out of university and they wanted to use technology. They didn't want to go to these old green screen technologies. So we had a big demand also for hybrid working, and that was before COVID when we developed this strategy. So, but we'll come back to that later because it does become more important to why we joined this. We moved on with this program at a pace. So, like most councils, we wanted to look at a strategy that provided collaboration tools for people, improve mobility, looked at sustainability. Was one of the first councils to declare we wanted to go net zero. Resilience had been pulled out of the contract, so we needed to build that up. We also need to optimize our investments and exploit new technologies. And as I've already said, we wanted a multi-vendor approach. So we came up with some design principles for IT delivery moving forward, and this was part of a strategy dates back to Tech. We call it Tech 2020. It was developed in 1819, but was going to be delivered by 2020. But we wanted to get to the place where we could have predictable total cost of ownership. We didn't understand our cost for IT. We knew we were in an outsourced arrangement, but we didn't understand the costs of the technology. We didn't want to start building things ourselves. We wanted to reuse. We wanted to buy off the market. We wanted to deliver best of breed. We also wanted to rationalize because we recognized that we had far too many servers in our estate. But I think at the time there was about 600 servers, and it was we never decommissioned anything. The techies love to keep it all the lights going, so we didn't bother with any of that. We also thought about open standards, but the main thing for us, we wanted to go cloud by default. And the reason that we wanted to do that is, one, because of understanding the cost of ownership, but two, because of where we'd been, we wanted to get to a place where we were more revenue focused rather than capital. Our members were telling us that they wanted the capital for the big major projects in the city. They didn't want to be spending it on IT. So it meant to me, if we were going to provide a service moving forward, if we got revenue control of that, that would be easier to maintain moving forward. We also started thinking about data in a bit more strategic way, and we wanted to build more resilience in, as I've already covered, but security was becoming more and more prevalent to us as we moved into the cyber season, especially as we got into the situation in Ukraine. And reiterating something that Rob said about technology as well, we wanted to deliver business solutions and not technical solutions. The business doesn't care about technology, and we agreed these principles across the whole of the council, and we got all the directors to sign up to, and we agreed that there'd be no exceptions to any of these principles moving forward. So what we devised was a 6-tower model, and we were going to focus on our data center, our applications, EUC, networks, service management side. The next slide is the focus in terms of what we decided to do was the council would focus on service management, security policies, and enterprise architecture, but we will work with vendors to deliver our towers around service delivery, which is the 4 towers that you can see there. And we've worked for a long time now with ANS, who've supported us in our migration from the outsourced provider, which wasn't an easy journey. And ANS were really supportive of us all the way through that. And it took us a couple of years, but we managed to get there. And I think, like probably many of you, COVID helped us speed up some of that transition, and it helped us move forward. But I'm sure Ines will share these slides, but if you look at the slides, there's not much talking about technology. It's talk about the things that we needed to do in terms of managing the service and moving it forward. Now my machine's stuck. Right. So what we looked at is what would our service delivery preferences would be, and we wanted to move into the cloud. So we knew some of our old applications would only work in infrastructure as a service models. So we decided that we'd look at Azure as our preferred platform, or we'd look at application providers as hosting our stuff. We had a small presence in the town hall, and we had some SaaS solutions that we wanted to move to. We looked at third parties and for database support, and added that to the data center tower. So we did do some database support with ANS in terms of our SQL side, but we also did some with other partners around Oracle as well. But we've only got 1 or 2 Oracle databases. We wanted to look at end user computing, and we looked at a managed service provider initially, but recognizing that we were going to get resources in from the outsourced provider, it was an interim arrangement. And then we looked at our networks where we had data voice and ISP, and they were all going managed service because we knew we were going to get the right skills. And then we looked at the service management in SIAM and said that we would keep them in-house and manage them ourselves. But what we ended up with is a collaboration between a number of small number of vendors and the in-house team to make sure we move forward as a service. So we came up with some TOM principles in terms of what the service is going to look like. We're going to have a centralized IT department. We have got quite a big centralized IT department, but there's still pockets of IT outside in the services, and we're actually going through a restructure moment looking at that and how we can bring them in to the centre. We wanted to achieve the right balance between centralized and devolved ICT too. So we wanted to give people the tools to do their job themselves, and without having to come to the central IT team to do everything for them. We needed to create an effective governance model, so we created a IT strategy board, which was made up across all the services. And we also created a technical design authority involving the business, which agreed the way to go in terms of where we're going as an organisation in the use of technology. We also wanted to make sure the resources were where they're needed, and building resilience, organisational learning, best use of resources, all that good stuff that you probably expect in any of your models. So where do we get to with the data center? So we have infrastructure as a service largely fully managed on our behalf by ANS. We have some past services where we're starting to look more at SQL in terms of how we can manage that, and we've started looking at the data warehouse solutions around Microsoft in terms of how can we get single views of data, how can we get single views of our children, or single views of adults. So we're doing some work on that. Hosted, we didn't want hosted really, we wanted cloud, but we weren't going to host anything internally at all. We wanted to think about optimizing the infrastructure and right sizing, and we work with ANS to build into our contract that for them to optimize our Azure tenancy for us, and they come with a monthly report to us to saying what our usage is and what we could potentially be saving, which was really helpful and helped us move and rationalize our costs. The Azure environment is managed by ANS, but co-managed by some of my staff now. When we started on this journey, we didn't have the right skills for people to do this. So part of our arrangement with ANS was to cross-skill some of our staff and work with ANS to move the platform forward, but then let our staff learn by using the platform, managing the platform. And we've done a gradual migration where we manage some of it and ANS manage some of it now, which helps me with my techies, because no, you'll probably get a lot of opposition from your techies on this side of things. Security was a big issue for us, and we currently ANS provide us with a SOC. If anybody was watching what was going on last week with Microsoft and the Defender changes and the patching that they had to withdraw last Wednesday, we thought we were under attack, and we worked with ANS and other providers to stand up a major incident because we thought we were going to have issues. We didn't have any issues, but I think having that relationship with the vendors was really important because they stood them up really quickly and supported us. We have issues around skills, as you all do, and database administration is an issue for us, but we work with different partners to help us do that. But capacity management and disaster recovery are things that we're still probably working on, because COVID made us focus on getting things up and running, and we still probably need a bit more work around capacity management and disaster recovery. I don't propose to go through this one, because this one isn't around the data center. All right, we all know we need a land, but I think it just impacts the. For me, it wasn't just about the data center. We wanted to put other things in the cloud, so we moved our contact center into the Storm solution by Content Guru, and we've done some work around SD-WANs, but it is about the journey of the cloud. It's not all at once. Most of you will probably start off looking at your data centers, but the cloud will also impact on these other areas as well as you move forward. And user computing, just to explain some of the issues that we had in terms of resolving issues around group policy and profiles and performance, and managing the way people access the network was really important to us as well. So we did implement a Windows 10 solution, and now actually moving to Windows 11, and the Azure AD has been key to us being able to manage that moving forward. So what were the benefits of all this for us? So we terminated a managed service contract with I won't say who with with one of the major vendors, but that was 3 months before COVID hit us, and we had an estate that was in the process of migration, and most of this migration took place during the COVID shutdown. So ANS worked with us to migrate our data center from the provider. We deployed 8,000 laptops. Most of the devices that people were using were 7 or 8-year-old PCs. We rolled out Azure RDS to help us deliver remote access when we were all sent home in March. So we increased our capacity from 500 to 8,000 people being able to remotely access. We rolled out Always On VPN. We moved to M365. And we deployed Teams telephony and replaced the contact center, as I already said. So we've also rolled out OneDrive and gotten rid of our H drives, which people don't manage, and we've managed to put in some data management on that and labeling, so we can classify some of the data more easily. We've moved SharePoint online. We've rolled out Intune and MECM for managing the environments. As I said, rolled out M365. We've moved everything from data center to SaaS or IaaS or hosted. We've got new contracts in place for equipment and services. We've moved from ServiceNow as a service desk and now onto For.Me. So whistle stop tour, but happy to answer any questions. I'll hand back to Craig.
Yeah, thanks. That was great. There's a last few remaining minutes, so I just want to tie up from an ANS perspective. There's a lot of organisations on this call that are just embarking on their cloud journey, but equally there are some organisations that will be starting at different places, whether you've got workloads in the cloud, you're fully in the cloud, and you've not started in the cloud. There will be a number of different starting points, but equally there are several different ways that ANS can help with what we call our Navigator program. Our Navigator program is ultimately a free of charge engagement to the majority of public sector organisations, which will help you understand where you are today, where you want to get to, whether it's a more modernised cloud environment, whether it's on-premise today into Azure, you want to get into more PaaS services, and what that'll impact from an operating model perspective, and how do we start tying back into what Pete mentioned before around modern tooling, and then equally, how do you get to where you need to get to with any accompanying business case. There were several different workshops that we'll go through, but what my team will do is follow up with everyone on this call. One, make sure that the session was valuable and a use of everyone's time. And equally, if there is any sessions that you do want to go through in terms of the Navigator program, we can look to discuss that in more detail. So that was everything from our perspective. There is 5 minutes left on the session, but I did want to make sure that if there was any questions, we'd covered them off. So I'll give it a moment just see if there is any questions from anyone on the call. Be interesting to understand from Mike how many servers he has in Azure and what the annual cost looks like. Also interested to know if backup is within Azure, backup data sits another cloud. How long did it take to architect landing zone and then migrate servers across? So I'll follow up with you direct as well, just to cover off them sessions. It might be able to. I'm sure Mike will be open to share his details with anyone on the call. So Vic, I'll share your Mike's details, but equally the team will follow up and provide any additional information from size and environment, run cost, the backup architecture, and what that looked like. Because I think, Mike, you're using some rubric elements as well. So there's a common theme with that rubric in Azure, some security in Azure. So there's a number of different elements which we can talk you through, Vic. So yeah, happy to run through that separately.
It's worth saying, Craig, that the optimization piece is a really important piece on working with your supplier to understand how your usage and knowing what the costs are great. And we started off really high because of RDS and the platform we stood up for remote access, but we've worked with yourselves to reduce that cost dramatically. And I'm talking in the order of from 90k a month down to 29, 30k a month. So
yeah,
that optimization piece is important.
Yeah, no, I agree. And probably the one big shift that everyone might encounter on the call is when you're managing on-premise, you're managing the hardware, you're managing uptime of that hardware. When you move into cloud, that shifts. The shift goes to how do I manage cost, how do I manage the architecture of the platform, and how do I keep it governed. So you might not necessarily, or the driver won't be to lose staff. It will be to change their role, so they're enhancing their own skills, they're enhancing their own careers into the newer world technology. So the change in focus will happen as you adopt cloud services. If there's no other questions, we'll wrap up. Mike, thanks for joining us. Really insightful from a Sheffield perspective. Everyone on the call, likewise, thanks for everyone's time. I will make sure that the slides are shared with everyone, and the team will follow up over the next 48 hours. Like I say, to make sure that the session was valuable. And thanks for everyone's time, and we'll see everyone soon, I'm sure. Cheers, everyone.